The chandelier shimmered over the family party, concealing a storm. I'm Melinda Foster, 27, caught amid a web of lies at my grandmother's birthday in Savannah's grandest old mansion. The air buzzed with forced laughter, clinking glasses, and my parents' polished smiles. Then my grandmother, a woman whose elegance hid steel beneath, raised her champagne flute. Her eyes met mine, sharp and unwavering. "Do you like the company shares I left you, dear?" she asked, her voice soft yet cutting. I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. "What company?" I managed my words, slicing through the chatter. The table fell silent. My mom's champagne flute hit the table with a sharp clink, her hand trembling. My dad's jaw tightened, his eyes darting to her. My cousin, usually smug, stared at his plate. The room seemed to hold its breath, every guest waiting. My grandmother set her glass down deliberately, her smile cold and knowing. "You'll understand soon," she said, her gaze piercing my parents. My stomach twisted. This wasn't just a question, it was a spark threatening to ignite a truth I hadn't foreseen. Their perfect act, worn for years, was cracking right there under the chandelier's glow. I knew this night would change everything, but how? The answer hung in the air, just out of reach, and I needed to know more. Got a family secret that flipped your world upside down? Spill it in the comments and subscribe for more. Grandma's call lingered in my mind. 2 weeks before that shattering night at her birthday party, I was just Melinda Foster, 27, scraping by in Savannah, Georgia. I worked as a marketing assistant at Carter Holdings, a family startup my grandmother had built from the ground up. The job paid enough to cover my cramped apartment, but the rent was always late, and my fridge contained more instant noodles than pride. I didn't mind the effort, it was mine. But my parents had a different vision of what success looked like. Mom and Dad loved to flaunt their new life. Their gleaming Savannah townhouse, bought after some vague investment win, screamed wealth. Over Sunday dinners, they'd talk about their latest Caribbean cruise, or Dad's new Lexus, voices dripping with smugness. "Melinda, you could afford more if you applied yourself," Mom would say, her smile sharp as a paper cut. Dad would nod, adding, "You're almost 30. Time to grow up." Their words stung, but I bit my tongue, knowing they'd never grasp my dedication. My grandmother was different. She'd founded Carter Holdings with sheer grit, turning it into a tech darling. Even in her 70s, she commanded boardrooms with her presence. She'd always seen something in me, slipping me extra cash during college or whispering, "You're more than they think." Months earlier, she'd pulled me aside at a family barbecue, her hand firm on my shoulder. "I left something in your name, dear," she said. "Your parents will know the details." I assumed it was advice or a small keepsake, not something life-changing. She had entrusted Dad to handle it, and I hadn't questioned it then. That changed with her call. I was microwaving dinner when my phone buzzed. Her voice, steady yet warm, came through. "Melinda, have you checked on the gift I arranged for you?" she asked. I frowned, stirring my noodles. "The gift? I thought you meant like advice." Her pause felt heavy, as if she'd expected a different answer. "Your father was supposed to explain," she said, a slight edge creeping in. "Ask him." The call ended abruptly, leaving me staring at my cracked kitchen counter, unease curling in my chest. I couldn't shake it. Dad handling something for me. That didn't add up. He'd always treated my ambitions like a hobby, dismissing my late nights at Carter Holdings as playing at work. Mom was worse, always comparing me to my cousin who had recently bragged about some big business deal at a family lunch. His smug grin and vague talk of opportunities had grated on me, but I'd brushed it off. Now it felt like a clue. The next day, I spilled everything to Gina, my best friend in accounting at work. We were grabbing coffee at a diner near Carter Holdings' downtown office, a 10-minute drive from my apartment. Gina leaned forward, eyes narrowing as I recounted Grandma's call. "That's strange," she said, stirring her latte. "Your grandma owns a chunk of this company. If she left you something, it's probably in the ownership logs. Have you checked your work email lately?" Her words hit like a spark. I hadn't thought to dig into company records. Marketing kept me far from that side of things. Gina's suggestion stuck with me. My parents' boasts, my cousin's cryptic swagger, and Grandma's mysterious call didn't align. I'd always trusted Mom and Dad even when their jabs hurt. But the idea that they'd kept something from me, something significant, gnawed at my gut. My cousin's deal felt connected, though I couldn't pin it down. I drove home that evening, my old sedan rattling through Savannah's oak-lined streets, replaying Grandma's words. Why hadn't Dad mentioned anything? What was this gift? Back at my apartment, I opened my laptop, staring at the Carter Holdings email login. My fingers hovered over the keys, hesitation gripping me. If I dug into this, there'd be no turning back. But the unease was louder than my doubts. I needed answers, and that email might hold them. That email was about to unravel everything. One evening, an email from work changed everything. I was sprawled on my couch, laptop balanced on my knees, when the Carter Holdings notification appeared. The subject line read, "Ownership Transfer Update," and my heart skipped a beat. I clicked, expecting routine company news, but the words hit like a punch. A major share transfer had been finalized, and my name was nowhere in the document. My grandmother's words from her call echoed something about a gift in my name. If this was it, where was I? I called Gina the next morning, my voice tight as I explained the email. We met at a cafe near the office, a short drive from my apartment in Savannah. My best friend leaned forward, brow furrowed. "That sounds like an ownership log," she said, pushing her glasses up. "Those emails track share movements. You're in marketing, so you wouldn't see these often. If your grandma meant shares, they'd be listed under your name unless someone moved them." Her words landed hard, and I gripped my coffee mug. "Can I check that?" I asked. She nodded. Not my expertise, but Ethan in IT could dig into the system. He's good with locked files. I found Ethan a coworker in IT later that day at Carter Holdings. His desk was a mess of monitors and coffee cups, but his grin was easy. "Ownership logs tricky, but I can pull the back-end data," he said, already typing. Within hours, he called me over his screen, glowing with numbers. "Here's the transfer," he pointed. The shares meant for me had been rerouted to a fund called Coastal Ventures. My stomach dropped when I saw the fund's manager, my father. Dad had taken what was mine, and Grandma didn't know. I drove to my parents' townhouse that evening, the oak-lined streets of Savannah blurring past. Mom answered the door, her smile practiced. "What's this about, Melinda?" she asked, already impatient. I didn't waste time. "The company shares Grandma left me. Where are they?" Her face tightened, and she crossed her arms. "Don't meddle in things you don't understand." She snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. She shut the door before I could push further, leaving me on the porch, pulse racing. Her dismissal wasn't just cold, it was a wall hiding something. Back in my car, I scrolled through old texts, hands shaking. One from my cousin caught my eye, sent weeks ago after a family lunch. "Big opportunity with your dad," it read, followed by a winking emoji. I'd ignored it then, chalking it up to his usual bravado. But now it felt like a neon sign. My cousin wasn't just boasting, he was in on something. Had Dad pulled him into this? The thought twisted in my gut, a mix of anger and disbelief. My parents had always prioritized their image, but this, taking what Grandma meant for me, felt like a knife in the back. I couldn't stop there. The email, Mom's deflection, and my cousin's text were pieces of a puzzle I didn't fully understand. Marketing kept me away from the company's financial side, so I'd never questioned the ownership logs before. But now I saw how little I knew about Carter Holdings' inner workings and how much my parents had counted on that. Ethan's data was a start, but I needed more. I texted Gina asking if she could connect me to anyone with access to the company's legal files. If Dad had moved those shares, there had to be a paper trail. The drive home was quiet, but my mind was loud. I'd trusted my family even when their jabs hurt. Now that trust was crumbling. My cousin's text, Mom's sharp words, and that email weren't coincidences. They were hiding something, and I was done waiting for answers. I had to confront this head on. The next day, I slipped into Grandma's office downtown. The Carter Holdings building rose tall in Savannah's historic district, its sleek glass facade hiding secrets I was determined to uncover. My heart pounded as I stepped off the elevator onto the executive floor where polished wood and soft lighting radiated power. I wasn't there for a marketing meeting I needed answers. My cousin's cryptic text and Mom's dismissal had sparked a fire in me, and the email about the share transfer was a glaring red flag. I had to find out what my parents had done. I found Lois, my grandmother's longtime assistant, at her desk outside the CEO's office. Her graying hair was pulled back, her eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. She had been with Grandma since Carter Holdings was just a dream, and her loyalty was unwavering. "Melinda," she said, voice warm but cautious. "What brings you up here?" I hesitated, then laid it out: the email, the missing shares, Grandma's call about a gift. Her expression shifted, suspicion flickering across her features. "Your grandmother thought you'd received those shares," she said, leaning closer. "She assumed you were already involved in management." My breath caught. "Management? I'm barely scraping by in marketing." Lois pressed her lips into a thin line, glancing at the closed office door. "Your parents were supposed to handle the transfer," she said, tone clipped. "I've had doubts about them for years." She stood, walked to a filing cabinet, and pulled out a thick folder. "Look at this," she said, sliding it across her desk. The pages were stamped with legal seals detailing a share transfer from Grandma's estate to me, except my father's signature sprawled across the authorization redirecting the shares to his fund, Coastal Ventures. I stared at the document, hands trembling. Dad had signed away what was mine, and Grandma didn't know. The betrayal burned a raw ache in my chest. Lois watched me, her eyes softening. "I didn't want to believe they'd do this," she said quietly. "But I've seen too many whispers between your parents and that fund." I nodded, barely hearing her. My mind raced. Dad had always preached family loyalty, yet here was his name, stealing my future. I stepped outside to the office balcony, needing air. The Savannah skyline stretched before me, but all I could see was that signature. I pulled out my phone and dialed Mark Sullivan, my grandmother's lawyer. I'd met him once at a company event, a silver-haired man with calm authority. He answered on the second ring. "Melinda, what's wrong?" he asked, sensing my urgency. I explained the documents, my voice steady despite the anger bubbling inside. "Those shares were registered in your name," he confirmed, tone grim. "Your father had power of attorney to execute the transfer, but it was meant for you, not his fund. This is a breach of trust." I gripped the balcony railing, metal cool under my palms. Mark's words were a hammer smashing any doubt. My parents hadn't just kept a secret, they'd stolen from me. I thanked him and hung up my mind, already turning to Grandma's birthday party. It was days away, the perfect moment to lay this bare. My parents would be there smiling their polished smiles, and my cousin would likely swagger in with his usual arrogance. They thought they'd gotten away with it, but I wasn't the naive girl they dismissed. Back at my apartment that night, I spread the documents on my kitchen table, mapping out my plan. The party would be packed, family, friends, Carter Holdings executives. Grandma deserved the truth, and I'd make sure it came out. I wasn't just fighting for shares, I was fighting for what was right. My anger surged, but I forced it down, channeling it into focus. I'd confront them where they couldn't hide, where their lies would unravel in front of everyone who mattered. I called Lois again, asking for copies of the documents to bring to the party. She agreed without hesitation, her voice firm. "Your grandmother built this company for people like you," she said. "Don't let them take that away." Her words stuck with me, a reminder of what was at stake. I wasn't just facing my parents, I was facing their greed, their belief that I'd stay silent. They were wrong. As I packed the papers into my bag, my resolve hardened. The party was my chance to expose them, to show Grandma what they'd done. I could see their faces, Mom's forced calm, Dad's stammered excuses, my cousin's smug grin faltering. I'd keep my cool, let the evidence speak, and watch their facade crumble. Justice wasn't just a word, it was my goal, and I was ready to claim it. The truth was closer, and I wouldn't let it slip. After work, Gina and I met at a quiet coffee shop. The place was a cozy hole in the wall a few blocks from Carter Holdings, its warm lights a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. I slid into the booth across from my best friend, the folder from Lois burning a hole in my bag. "I've got proof," I said, my voice low as I pushed the documents toward her. My father signed away the shares Grandma intended for me. Gina's eyes widened as she scanned the pages, her fingers tracing his signature. "This is serious, Melinda," she whispered. "You can't let this slide." I nodded, jaw tight. The papers confirmed my fears. My parents had taken what was rightfully mine, and Grandma was unaware. Gina leaned back, expression soft but resolute. "You have to confront them," she said. "At the party, in front of everyone. Your grandmother deserves the truth, and you deserve those shares." Her words were a lifeline, pulling me from the anger threatening to consume me. She wasn't just a friend, she was my anchor, keeping me grounded when all I wanted was to scream. Back at my apartment, I searched through my laptop for anything I might have missed. That's when I found it, an old email thread buried in my cousin's chatty messages to the family. He had sent it to my father months ago, the subject line a bland business update. But the content stopped me cold. "Thanks for the heads up on the fund, Uncle Richard. That profit split will clear my student loans fast." My heart sank. My cousin wasn't just a bystander, he knew about the share transfer and stood to benefit. His debts were no secret, but this. It was a deal with my father, and I had been left out. I fired off a text to him, fingers shaking. "What's this about you and Dad's fund? Did you know about my shares?" His reply came quickly, too casual. "Not your business, sis. Stay out of it." The dodge was as good as a confession, igniting a fire in me. My cousin's smug tone, the same he used at family lunches, made my blood boil. He thought he could brush me off just like Mom had. But I wasn't backing down. The next morning, I called Lois, my voice steady despite the knot in my chest. "I need more evidence," I told her. "Anything linking my cousin to this." She didn't hesitate. "Meet me at the office after hours," she said. "I have access to the internal logs." That evening, I drove back to Carter Holdings, the Savannah streets, quiet under a fading sunset. Lois waited in her office, a stack of printouts ready. "These are transaction records," she explained, pointing to highlighted lines. "Your cousin received payments from Coastal Ventures, small but consistent. They started right after the share transfer." The numbers stared back at me, undeniable. My father had looped my cousin into his scheme, using Grandma's company to settle his debts. Lois's face was grim. "I've watched your parents sideline you for years," she said. "This crosses a line." Her support fueled me, but as I drove home, a different weight settled in. My family was unraveling: Mom's cold dismissal, Dad's signature, my cousin's greed. I had grown up idolizing them despite their jabs. Now the thought of confronting them at Grandma's party twisted my heart. Would exposing them destroy us forever? Part of me wanted to walk away to preserve the peace. But another part, the part remembering Grandma's faith in me, demanded justice. I spent the next few days refining my plan. The party would be at Grandma's mansion, packed with family and company executives. I would bring the documents, present the evidence, and let the truth speak. Lois promised copies would be ready, and I rehearsed my words, imagining my parents' faces when I called them out. My cousin's smirk would fade, and Mom's practiced smile would crack. But the image of Grandma's reaction haunted me. Would she blame me for tearing the family apart? I pushed the thought aside, focusing on the folder in my bag. This wasn't just about me. It was about what she had built. Late at night, I sat on my couch, the documents spread out like a map of betrayal. Anger surged, but so did grief. I had spent years trying to prove myself to my parents, to show I was more than their immature daughter. Now I saw them for what they were, people who put their greed above family. My cousin was no better trading loyalty for a quick payout. Yet as I pictured the party, a small voice whispered what comes next. A broken family, perhaps forever. I shook it off, gripping the folder tighter. I wasn't just fighting for shares, I was fighting for the truth Grandma deserved. The party was my moment to strike. The night of Grandma's birthday arrived thick with tension. The grand Savannah mansion buzzed with guests, family friends, Carter Holdings executives, all gathered beneath glowing chandeliers. I stood near the dining room, my folder of evidence tucked safely in my purse, my heart pounding like a drum. The air felt heavy, every smile a mask. My parents mingled with practiced ease, Mom's laugh, sharp, Dad's posture, rigid. My cousin lingered by the bar, his grin as smug as ever. I gripped my glass, bracing myself for what was coming. Grandma entered her presence commanding despite her age. She wore a tailored dress, her eyes scanning the room with quiet authority. As dinner began, she raised her champagne flute, the chatter fading. "So, Melinda," she said, her gaze locking onto mine, "do you like the shares I left you?" The question hit like a spark, just as it had weeks ago. The table froze, forks clattering softly. I took a breath, my voice steady. "What company?" I asked, reflecting my earlier confusion but now armed with the truth. Mom's glass slipped, shattering on the table with a piercing crash. Wine splashed her dress, her face paling. Dad coughed, his voice rushed. "We were protecting your future, Melinda," he said, his words hollow. Guests exchanged glances, the room electric with unease. Grandma's eyes narrowed, her flute still raised. "Well, maybe it's time they explain," she said, her tone sharp enough to cut through the silence. I stepped forward, pulling the folder from my purse. "I can explain," I said, my voice carrying. Mark, my grandmother's lawyer, stood nearby, his silver hair catching the light. I had asked him to come, knowing his presence would strengthen my case. He nodded, stepping beside me. "These documents," he said, holding up the papers Lois had given me, "show a transfer of shares meant for Melinda. Her father's signature authorized their move to Coastal Ventures, his fund." The room gasped, murmurs rippling. Dad's face reddened, his hands gripping the table. "It was a temporary move," he stammered, "to secure the company." Mom stared at her lap, silent. I turned to my cousin, his smirk gone, replaced by a nervous twitch. "You knew," I said, my voice low but firm. "Your emails to Dad about profit splits, paying off your loans. You were part of this." His eyes darted to the floor, then back to me, defiance flickering. "I needed the money," he muttered, barely audible. "It wasn't personal." The admission hung in the air, raw and ugly. Guests shifted uncomfortably, their whispers growing. Grandma set her glass down, the clink deliberate. Her face was stone, but her eyes burned with a fury I had never seen. "You three," she said, pointing at Mom, Dad, and my cousin, "thought you could steal from my granddaughter, from my legacy." Her voice rose steady but laced with rage. "I trusted you, Richard, to handle her shares. You betrayed us both." Dad opened his mouth but no words came. Mom reached for his arm, her face crumpling. My cousin shrank in his seat, his bravado gone. Grandma turned to me, her expression softening yet resolute. "Melinda," she said, "those shares were yours to lead this company forward." "They still are." She faced the room, her voice commanding. "Effective immediately, I'm transferring full control of a new share allocation to Melinda." "You three," she glared at my parents and cousin, "are cut off. From me, from this family, from Carter Holdings." The words landed like a gavel. Guests sat, stunned, the air thick with shock. Mom let out a choked sob, but Dad just stared ahead, his face blank. My cousin pushed back his chair, muttering something about fairness, but no one listened. Mark stepped forward, handing me a new document. "This reinstates your shares," he said quietly. "Your grandmother's orders." I took it, my hand steady despite the chaos in my chest. This was justice, but it didn't feel like victory. I looked at Grandma, her eyes meeting mine with a mix of pride and pain. She had built Carter Holdings from nothing, and now she was entrusting it to me. But the cost was steep, my family fractured beyond repair. Mom's tears, Dad's silence, my cousin's excuses. They were strangers now. The room watched as I clutched the document, my resolve hardening. I had fought for the truth, and I had won, but the weight of it pressed against me. As guests dispersed whispering about the fallout, I stood by Grandma's side. She squeezed my hand, her grip firm. "You're stronger than they are," she said softly. "Lead with that." I nodded, but my mind lingered on the wreckage, years of family dinners, holidays, trust, all shattered in one night. I had exposed their lies, but the truth hadn't set me free. It had carved a new path, one I would walk alone. I stepped into my new role, but the scars remained. The morning after, the mansion was eerily silent. The grand dining room, alive with chaos the night before, now stood empty, its polished tables reflecting the soft morning light. My parents and cousin had left without a word. No apologies, no glances back. Their absence carved a hollow space in me, a mix of relief and lingering ache. I stood by the window, staring at the sprawling gardens of Grandma's Savannah estate, the new share documents heavy in my hand. I had won, but the victory carried a bitter taste. I wandered outside, drawn to the small lake behind the mansion. The water rippled gently, framed by ancient oaks draped in moss. Grandma found me there, her steps soft on the grass. She carried a slim folder, her expression calm yet weighed with unspoken pain. "Melinda," she said, sitting beside me on a stone bench, "power means little if you lose yourself." Her words landed softly but carried the weight of her years. She handed me the folder, new share certificates, freshly signed, granting me control of Carter Holdings. "These are yours," she said. "Lead with the strength I know you have." I traced the papers, my fingers lingering over her signature. The shares represented more than wealth, they embodied her trust, her legacy. But as I looked at her, the deeper lines etched into her face gnawed at me with guilt. I had exposed my family, torn them apart. Mom's tears, Dad's silence, my cousin's muttered excuses, they haunted me. Had I been too harsh? Could I have handled it differently? Each question cut against my resolve. Grandma seemed to sense it. "You did what was right," she said firmly. "They chose their path. You chose truth." Her hand rested on mine, warm and steady. "You're not responsible for their mistakes." I nodded, but the weight did not lift. I had spent years seeking their approval, enduring jabs about my immature choices. Now they were gone, leaving me both free and tethered to the wreckage. News of the scandal spread quickly. Savannah's tight-knit business circles buzzed with gossip. My parents' names, once respected, now whispered with disdain. Their investment deals dried up, invitations to elite galas vanished. Dad's Coastal Ventures Fund, once a rising star, was shunned by partners wary of his ethics. Mom, who had thrived on social status, retreated from public view, her absence from charity boards noted in hushed tones. I learned all this through colleagues at Carter Holdings, each rumor a reminder of the cost of truth. My cousin faced his own reckoning. His hopes of a cushy role at Carter Holdings evaporated. Grandma's decree ensured he would never set foot in the company. I discovered from a mutual friend that he had taken a low-paying job out of state, his debts still looming. Part of me pitied him, remembering his boasts about big opportunities. But pity faded when I recalled his email to Dad, trading my future for his gain. He had made his choice just like my parents had. Back at my apartment, I spread the share documents on the table, staring at the numbers that now defined my role. Carter Holdings was mine to steer, a chance to honor Grandma's vision. Yet every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mom's crumpled face, Dad's blank stare. Had I pushed too hard? Had publicly exposing them been cruel? The thought gnawed at me, a quiet voice asking if I had traded justice for vengeance. I pushed it away, but it lingered, a shadow I could not shake. I visited Grandma again the following week, needing her clarity. We sat by the lake, the water still beneath a gray sky. "Do you ever regret standing up to people you love?" I asked softly. She gazed toward the horizon, eyes distant. "Regret is part of caring," she said. "But you did not destroy this family, they did. You are worthy of this, Melinda. Don't let guilt steal it from you." Her words were a lifeline pulling me from doubt. She had built an empire from nothing, faced battles of her own. If she believed in me, I had to believe in myself. Driving home through Savannah's oak-lined streets, the city felt different mine in a way it had never been. The shares gave me power, but Grandma's faith gave me purpose. I would lead Carter Holdings not just for profit, but to prove I could rise above the pain. My family's choices had broken us, but they would not break me. Still, the ache of their absence followed a reminder that freedom came at a cost. I had my future, but the past lingered. Days later, I walked into Carter Holdings' main office. The sleek glass doors parted, revealing the executive floor where I had once felt like an outsider. Now I belonged. I crossed the polished hallway, my heels clicking with purpose, and entered the corner office, my office. A polished desk gleamed under soft light, and on it sat a brass plaque engraved with my name, Melinda. I ran my fingers over the letters, a quiet thrill pulsing through me. This was no longer my grandmother's domain or my parents' battlefield. It was mine. I sank into the leather chair, the weight of the past weeks settling around me. The journey to this moment had been a storm. My grandmother's cryptic question at her party, the email that unraveled secrets, the documents proving my parents' deception. I had stood up to them, exposed their lies in front of everyone, and watched my family fracture. My cousin's greed, my mother's silence, my father's excuses, they had all crumbled under the truth. Yet sitting here, I did not feel triumphant. I felt transformed. The view outside stretched across Savannah's historic district rooftops framed by ancient oaks. I had grown up in this city tied to the Carter name, always chasing approval I would never earn. My parents had seen me as a pawn, my cousin as a rival. But I had trusted my instincts, something deeper than their expectations, and it had led me here. The shares my grandmother entrusted to me were not just power. They were proof that I could carve my own path. Trust your instincts over family ties, I thought. That lesson was etched into every step of this fight. Under my leadership, Carter Holdings began to shift. I met with department heads, my marketing background, guiding bold campaigns that drew new clients. The company's stock climbed, whispers of my parents' scandal fading as our results spoke louder. Colleagues who had once dismissed me now listened, their nods a quiet acknowledgement of my place. I poured myself into the work, late nights blending into early mornings, each decision a brick in the legacy I was building. This was not about erasing the past. It was about claiming the future. Yet as the company thrived, my thoughts drifted to what I had lost. My parents had not reached out since the party, their absence a cold void. I had heard through colleagues that they had left Savannah, their reputations in tatters. My cousin was gone too, chasing jobs far from the city's judgment. I wondered if they hated me, if they saw me as the one who had torn us apart. Guilt crept in at quiet moments, whispering that I had been too harsh, too unforgiving. Had I fought for justice or for pride? The question lingered unanswered. I pushed back against it, focusing on the office around me. The plaque on my desk was a reminder not of victory, but of choice. I had chosen truth over loyalty to a family that had never truly seen me. My grandmother's words by the lake echoed, I was worthy. She had believed in me when I doubted myself, and that faith anchored me now. I was not just leading a company, I was proving I could stand alone. One evening, I stayed late reviewing a new contract. The office was quiet, the city lights twinkling beyond the window. I leaned back, my eyes catching the plaque again. It was not just a name, it was a declaration. I had spent years tied to the Carter legacy, defined by my family's expectations. Now I was free, not because I had won, but because I had chosen myself. Trust your instincts over family ties was not just a lesson, it was my truth, hard-earned and undeniable. This story, I realized, was not about shares or scandals. It was about finding strength in your own voice even when it costs you everything familiar. For anyone listening, the value is clear. Your instincts are your compass, truer than any bond that demands you shrink. I had lost my family, but I had gained myself. As I looked out over Savannah, the city no longer felt like a weight. It was my home, and I belonged here not as a Carter heir, but as Melinda, whole and unyielding. I ran my hand over the plaque with my name, no longer a Carter heir, but my own person.